What is going on, South by East fam? Welcome back to Traffic Reports on the South by East podcast, where we talk about the culture, the scriptures, and everything in between. This week, I got something that's a little bit in that culture bag, man. I shot this to you, John, a little bit ago. Producer Timbaland was talking about how he's staying relevant in this time of life, and I just thought it'd be so interesting to look at his approach and how we can look at that in some of the other areas of our leadership and the impact we want to make. So I'm gonna roll this video.
I always use this movie, Cars 3. Lightning McQueen was the main race driver, winning all the time. It hurt him in Cars 3 because he had that spunk no more, not knowing that the girl was his best kept secret. She was faster, so he said, you know what, I got to rethink how I'll be Lightning McQueen. Mentor.
Yeah.
That's going to keep you.
Now you still in it.
You still in it, and you still hot.
Right.
You just got to find a way to be hot, and you have to accept that this young boy snare is better than my snare. That young boy kick is better than my kick. So let me go to this young boy, get his game set, and learn to say, you know what, you should move that there, move that there. They be like, that's why you Timbo the King. I'm so used to being hands-on, but now you have to learn how to pivot what you are.
Right.
That's why y'all show us to pivot.
Right.
You have to pivot who you are and be great at that.
Timbo the King, man. You got to pivot who you are to be who you are, man. So I pose this question to you, John. What does your next pivot look like? And I'm just interested to see how that looks for you in the world of leadership and prepping your next step and what that looks like.
Yeah, so, man, it's one of those deals that I talk about all the time, and people say it's not normal. I've been at Fellowship Hi-Crest, and I founded Sin about 7 years ago, both around the same time. And you know, I've spoken with some of the team that really I'm looking at over the next 8 to 10 years, my transition out, if that.
Yeah.
And my deal has always been, I didn't want to build something that was centered around me, but really something that could work without me.
Yeah.
And so my goal is looking at how to increasingly decrease my role. And it's not that I might live the next 30, 40 years in the Hi-Crest community. But having my seat change. You know, from the beginning when we built this, one of my rules was when somebody on your team can do something 60% as good as you, then you should
Pass it off.
Right? And so it's over time, there's a lot of things, almost besides lead worship, which actually during our, before we started actually organized services during our church plant training meetings, I actually did lead worship.
You did lead worship, yeah.
And,
about that. How was you?
And so, like, pretty much every role in our body I have done. And over time, I've had the steady hand-off role, right? And so that's always been my goal, is to hand off things. And even with Scent, right now, we thought we had a succession plan, and it's kind of altered a little bit in how we're looking at that. And so for both roles, right, for the church, our next role is really looking at a teaching pastor. That we culture into maybe the next lead pastor, and then for Sin, an operations director that looks at becoming the next executive director and building more of a pipeline over this time, and not finding my significance in the seat that I sit in, but more in my obedience and wherever I find myself.
Yeah.
And so for me, that allows me to not feel diminished in any way, or that my gifts aren't being used, and also to make way for fresh ideas. And I love seeing people grow and blossom. And so, like, even when it came to teaching, right, on Sundays,
Yep.
I was told even as recently as my last vacation of how strange and unordinary that it was that I preach so infrequently. Like, my goal has always been 26 Sundays or less a year that I want to speak, because I believe that God could use a mule, right? I like, really, the way we jokingly say it is, God could use any old ass.
Yeah.
And so, one, I don't want the people that are part of the Fellowship of Hi-Crest body to think that God can only speak through me. The mature believer is easily edified, and I believe that those in leadership play a role in helping to culture the body to be able to be
100%.
edified from
100%.
various voices. And so I just think it's important that you see your relativity found in your legacy,
Yeah.
not in your dominance.
Yeah, and I think that's pretty close to my approach too. Is like you talk about that last part of it. For me, it's about what am I building. I'm a generalist in a lot of things. We just met with some other people, and they're like, "How many instruments do you play?" I was like, "Well, how many instruments do I consider myself to play professionally? 2. How many instruments can I play at a professional level? Like 6, 7. But I would never want to fill those roles because I wouldn't feel like I was doing my best and my highest in those roles. And for me, even as I build things like here with the church, since I came in, I'd be like, all right, who will I bring in to take my job? I haven't found them people yet, but but I've trained up several who could take pieces and start spreading it out over a team and doing that. And even on the music side, when it comes to the music I create, I've always felt like, man, that area is an area where I'm at my best and highest, and where the work that I do here in this area, I don't know anyone else that could do it. But recently I started seeing other people that I'm like, maybe at 30%, but they could get to 60, right? And I've started spending time with other artists. This year has been me spending time with other artists and some younger artists. And there are some things that I've been teaching and I've had to learn, but then there's some other stuff where I'm like, I never would have came up with that. I never would have thought of that. And I'm seeing the same type of passion for students and for people learning and for people growing. And I'm like, okay, I'm investing myself to pour into you, because in no area of my life do I feel like what I do is something. I may be the only person I know that can do it, but I'm not the only person God can use to do it.
Yeah.
And so in no area of my life am I going like I'm completely irreplaceable when it comes to task. As a person, that's different. As a father, that's different. As a husband, that's different. But when it comes to task, I feel like my role is to build something that other people can step into and take to the next level. When I was in Spain, I was learning a lot about businesses, and I'm sure you've heard this and noticed. They say the mark of having a successful business is when you can walk away and the business still runs. And so in everything that I build, I'm like, okay, can I walk away and this still runs? Can I walk away from student ministry and this still work? Can I walk away from worship and this still work? Can I go away from a time and this still be able to maintain and move forward?
But here's the deal too. Here's the balance on that. It's been 7 years, 2017, November 2017 to now, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I started doing the work on these before I even moved officially to town.
Mm-hmm.
And like the vacation I just took was the first one with no iPad, no computer. Just like I've taken vacations, you know how I am. I'm always gonna travel, man.
Yeah.
But had to have some kind of like check-in and different things.
Yeah.
Just now getting to the
Right.
point. And like our teams are growing a bit, and like we're in one of those real stages now, man, and really trying to congeal the culture even more because we have so many new people.
We're a teenager right now. We're in an awkward phase where we're kind of big, but we're not an adult, and the brain is constantly changing.
And
right?
we're at one of those changes, like if you read a lot of Patrick Lencioni materials, that we're having to change our style of leadership because the size of our team is changing.
Yeah.
And just he does some incredible writing around that. And so, but I want to balance that of, and that's why I said the things that I said at the beginning in my opening statement the way I did. I believe there's too many people. Let me go back. Let me take that back. It is well known right now that if you stay with an organization long term, you won't make the amount of money you could if you change companies every 4 to 5 years. Right? But I don't want to be a person whose greatest accomplishment came by meeting my maximum earning potential in my career. That's not going to be the measure of success for me at the end of this. And so part of that means really setting down roots and going deep in a place.
Yeah.
But even in that, bro, you'll know that my goal has never been like do this really big thing. I'm really, really, really serious about like consistency and doing like the details and being like very super consistent and really good at these things that I do, and then us being able to repeat them over and over again and how we do them with a level of excellence. And so that's really what I'm trying to build around. And if I can influence that in a group of people that come after me to say, man, we're going to focus like really, we're going to pick a place for 20 years. For 20 years, and we're going to invest in that place for 20 years, and we're going to become really excellent at something we do in that environment for 20 years.
Yeah.
I think the impact, the big thing will be there. It's the getting up every day and doing it with excellence, not shying away from the hard thing that has to happen. That I think is the pivot, and part of that is pouring into others, man.
Yeah, that's
and being patient with the time it takes for development to happen.
You have to have the same approach when it comes to pouring into others. Like, and I agree, like, man, the consistency and going in and getting it. And some people will get that part and not realize that when it comes to building relationships for the person that comes after you, it takes the same approach and the same type of effort to help someone else get to where you've been. Because I also believe if I came in and I did what I did consistently and I built the systems and I built the processes and I figured out the formulas, the person that comes after me, I expect them to do the same. I expect them to give the same effort, but they shouldn't be doing the same work. Because this work's done. This work should be done. Now, your work is going forward. And so I need to walk beside you as you do the next. You may be refining the processes. You may be helping us scale what's next. You may be bringing the next creative idea, which is a fresh start. And now we got to put that same type of effort in. But if I really did my job well, if I was consistent here and I worked hard at this here, I should have something to pass off to you and to help you home.
One of my greatest examples of that is, I love this passage. When I've been asked to speak at some different men's retreats, I've used this passage. It's from the end of David's life, at the end of 1 Chronicles, and when he's getting ready to pass the torch to Solomon, and you know how he wanted to build the temple, but God said you can't do it.
Yeah.
And when he's literally, first of all, he passes the crown before he dies. And then 2, he sacrificially gives for the future work of the person that he passed the crown to. He says, look, I've done everything I could to help prepare. Not only did he write a check, because it says he emptied all his personal treasures.
Yeah.
But it goes through this detail of explaining how he's prepared the craftsman
the work
to be around,
Yeah.
to actually do the work. Like he poured into the people, the team. He tried to give his son not only the financial means, but also the team needed.
Yep.
He gave him the authority by passing the crown, and then he shared wisdom with him from his learnings and said, hey, this is what I did wrong. Here's what left undone. And he laid like hands up in a way of saying, there's some decisions you have to make. I could make these decisions on how this is being done, but to show that I really trust you and where you're going, I'm gonna let you make the decision on how to handle that best. Absolutely love it. He didn't. He didn't do everything right in his life, but man, he did really well at passing it off. And I think, man, if I could live that out, I every time I read that passage, I think of my children. I think of what I want to pass on to them, how I want to pass it on to them, and it really sits with me well. And it also speaks of what I want to do when it comes to both Fellowship Hi-Crest and Sent. I don't want to be at a point where I have to be forcibly removed.
Yeah.
I want to be always thinking about how to gracefully bow out. And I want to sit under the leadership of the next leader for both.
That's the thing. And I think that's not, a lot of people find that unnatural. And I experienced that early in my career somewhere where I was in a position, someone was leading something, and then I became the leader, and they're like, no, we got to get this other person out of here because they just won't. And I'm like, well, I'm not saying they got to sit right next to me, but I would benefit from having them around, from having them here. And I was like, when I get to the place where I'm ready to transition, I want to have built a culture where there's a seat for me, and that seat does not usurp the authority of the person that I have passed that authority on to. I mean, I see that the best in families where you see multiple generations moving and pouring in, and you know who does this really well, actually, like, is my mom. Growing up, I had a friend, quick story, I had a friend, his daughter was getting older, he was one of my best friends, and man, his daughter, I just thought she was a butt. I loved her, she was my goddaughter, but she was a butt. I was like, fam. And it's like, I felt like he was just letting her be a butt. I'm like, bro, you handle that, like, you know. And we were all at the house, like he called my mom, and we were at the house, and she did something, and I started to get on her, and my mom was like, Phil. And then once they left the room, she was like, come here. It's like, what? She was like, you're not her daddy. That's her daddy. I was like, but she was doing, she was like, I know. And then you should talk to her dad about it. But you're not her daddy. Don't ever overstep the authority of that parent. That's their role. If you really want to support that child, you need to go talk to their parents because he has to have that role. That's the appropriate chain of command. And I was like, yes, ma'am. And it just taught me a lot. And the thing is, too, everything that I wanted to impose on that child, I learned from my mom, who was sitting right there. And she went, nope, that's not my role today. That's his role.
But, bro, you know how I am about that, even here in the church and in Sent.
Yep.
How somebody will want to come to me about a topic, and if it's in somebody else's...
somebody else's box.
And I've had a lot of people get upset with me.
Yeah.
Because I'll say, no, like the place that you have to start that conversation is with that person who leads that effort. And a lot of times that shuts people down. Like, people will be like, well, if I can't talk with you, and I was like, and it's not about me being inaccessible or anything else, but I never want to cut the legs off of one of my leaders.
Right.
I always want to bestow that authority on and let them know that I trust them and I'm behind them. And so I'm saying, hey, no, you need to start that. I don't like people to do the circle around and around.
And I think that culture, I think that sets up well for a culture where, okay, when I was the leader, this is how I led. Now I'm no longer the leader. When I was the leader, I had the authority and I empowered the people around me with the appropriate amount of authority. My amount of authority has succeeded to here. So this is what I can do. This is what I can't do. And I expect you to do your piece.
Man,
but how about y'all? What is your next step of pivot, of generational leadership or impact? What does that look like for you? We would love to hear it. If you're on Facebook, we'd love to see it in the comments. On YouTube, we'd love to see it in the comments. If you're on Buzzsprout, continue to follow. We appreciate you doing that. Share it with somebody who you think might need to hear it. And we'll see you next week in the intersection.